Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I know I've been hammering you in these intros with stuff about cancer and then losing my wife and then her celebration parties. And while the future of these intros are going to be about snow and getting my life back on track and who knows what else, I do have one more thing to share about Angapalooza. So Saturday night of that weekend, her celebration weekend, was the bar night at the Admiral Benbow. And it was packed and it was awesome. I went back there a couple days after the party to pick up some of the things I left behind, and the bartender came up to me and she thanked me so much for having the party at the Benbow. And I was like, no, thank you. We really needed this venue. You guys gave it to us. It was great. And she was like, no, thank you. Even though there was a huge block party and they did think they'd get a huge crowd in the Benbow, our party was better. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, look, I was the first person hired at this bar when they reopened in like 2021. And since we've opened, we haven't had a night where we've made more money than we did on Angapalooza night. And since I've been the first bartender here and I've probably worked here more than anybody else, she could honestly say that there hadn't been a more fun night in her entire time at the bar. And she was like, it was just because the vibe inside was so fun and all the people were just so kind and happy to be there partying for their friend Ange. So it's pretty cool that she set the record. And to be honest, Ange's friends and mine too are really, really good at partying. And Ange literally and figuratively sets the bar for what to do on a celebration of life night. I mean, any other celebration I go to that's going to be at a bar, I'm secretly going to be wondering, well, did they break the record in sales of the bar? Because Ange did at her celebration of life. And to be honest, it's not a contest. I mean, if you're in the contest of how your celebration of life did at a bar, you've already lost because you're dead. So not a contest any of us want to be in. That's enough about sad stuff in this intro. I've got so much more of that in the podcast. This is another heavy one. It's with a trailblazer of an athlete and an incredibly strong human, Kimmy Fasani. I've already recorded part 1 with Kimmy, so you can hear her life and times from about 8 years ago on the podcast. This podcast picks up where that left off, and that was pretty much the time that she picked up the camera, and she didn't pick up the camera. Tyler Hamlet picked up the camera and started filming her for her masterpiece, Butterfly in a Blizzard, and we talk all about that during the podcast. But before we get into it, I want to thank you for listening. I want to ask you to please share my social posts and tell a friend about the show. But most importantly, please support my incredible sponsors who make this podcast happen. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, Best Day Brewing, and Liquid Force. Now, let's chat with Kimmy Fasani. Before we talk about all the heavy stuff in your life, I'm going to start with some light stuff in your life. And it's going to go around the Grateful Dead. You're married to pro skier Chris Chetler. He has a relationship with the Dead. Have you always been a fan of the Dead, or is this something new?
My mom loved classic rock. She had an amazing record collection. And so we acquired that when she passed away. And Chris got into the Dead. We have a really close friend that has always loved the Dead. When Chris started making graphics with them, I think it really elevated his interest in them even more. And then that obviously kind of led into more of it playing in our household and being more kind of like a through line for all the music that we listen to.
What is the coolest VIP Grateful Dead experience? Because you kind of, I would think, get to see behind the curtain a little bit.
I've been able to go to a lot of really wonderful shows and just meeting the band and seeing how close they are to one another. I really enjoyed being at the Sphere last year for a handful of shows. Just seeing them in that environment, in that space, was something that's so special and so unique for how music is played. And the visuals that they show there is just something that I've never really seen. It's such a unique way of seeing a band live.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best venue I've ever been to in my life. But I guess that's what happens when you spend $1 billion on a venue. It turns out pretty great.
Yeah, it was really, really incredible to see music there.
Okay, well, that's the Grateful Dead, and we'll go back into when we talked last time. You were at the peak of your career. You were like Rider of the Year. You had graduated from the contest scene, and all of your dreams were coming true, and your mom had just passed away, and we're going to kind of start there and follow the trajectory of your incredibly heavy movie, or Butterfly in a Blizzard. But it starts out with your strong ass single mom, and she was like old. She had you at 40. Was that crazy at the time that you had the old mom?
I always saw my mom as being very unique. She had a different way of seeing things. She was so free spirited, kind of a hippie, and I felt like the way she raised me was different. I had a lot of freedom, a lot of independence, and only later in my life did I realize what a gift that was. And the way that she was raising me was something that was so special because it really did have a different line than most of my other friends. And I think because she was older, she had experienced a lot of life. And because she was a single mom, she had a different way of having to raise me, and that created a lot of independence. So I think her age really at the end was the best part of when she chose to have me.
And then when you think about it, you grow up in her ski lifestyle and you're a skier, but you eventually want to try snowboarding. And do you go to the snowboard side so you can have something to your own that's like not at your mom's, it's just Kimmy's thing?
I think snowboarding really turned into this feeling of doing something different. I don't know, there was like a rebellious style of living through that community. And I liked being able to do something that my mom couldn't do. She hadn't chose to snowboard. She'd always wanted me to be on skis with her. And so me being able to kind of break out and do that and show her that it was more than just another sport. At the very beginning, she got me my first board and she thought it was just going to be another little hobby. So she didn't invest in boots right away. I had Sorels with duct tape around them. You know, it was like that type of investment. And then as I started being more committed, I think it just kind of gave me that separation, but it also gave me something to be really passionate about. And she loved seeing that passion. So she really helped by enabling me to do that sport and chase my dreams as long as I was working hard at it.
And you were chasing your dreams, you were competing, and you were doing well, and that kind of shapes your young childhood. We're not going to really talk about snowboarding at that point, but people can hear all of that stuff really in our last podcast. When you think about your life and times, like you had so much awesome going on, but you had a lot of bad stuff start out. And at 13, like you find out your dad has cancer. I mean, I don't know how tight you were with your dad, but I'm sure that's probably the first time you're served up a plate of bad news. How do you deal with that at 13?
I found out my dad was sick with cancer, and there was a little bit of protection happening. Nobody really told me how long he would have or how sick he was. And so, being that it was the first person that I had ever seen go through cancer, I just didn't know really what to expect. And being a young teenager, I think I didn't really understand how much I cared about my parents, or I was like drifting from that side of like needing them all the time to becoming more independent.
Yeah.
And with my dad, it really rocked me because I felt like my family was already different. My mom was a single mom. My dad struggled with alcoholism. They didn't live together. They were never married. And now my dad died from cancer. I just felt pretty isolated in that grief. And that loss really drove me to snowboarding. And I don't know why, but I think there was something that was such a gift about the mountains at that time. Competing kind of opened my eyes to this other side of something that felt really good. And I'm so lucky that the mountains were there, that I could go to them instead of going a little bit darker, because that loss felt just heavy. He was like this outdoor enthusiast and would take me fishing and hunting. And it was also that father figure in my life. To not have that just felt really different.
There's also another thing about your dad, which I didn't bring up, but when you said hunting and fishing, for some reason it sparked in my mind. Your dad has one leg, right? Or had one leg?
Yeah, my dad was an amputee. He lost a leg due to something that got in the bottom of his foot. So that was like another factor.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, well, anyway, I'm sorry about that loss. And I guess you lose yourself in the snowboarding. And we talked about back then that you moved to Mammoth and you started competing a lot and getting sponsors and traveling the world. But that didn't all happen right away. What happened first was, it sounds like you met Chris Chris, and it was love at first sight, like you say in the movie. Was it really love at first sight for both of you guys? Like you knew within you coming up to him being like, hey, your dad's dead and my dad's dead and they both died of cancer. We should be friends, which is weird in itself that that's your pickup line. That you guys were going to be together forever from then?
I mean, you kind of just painted the perfect picture. I walked into the ice cream store. I had known his brother. They both scooped ice cream at this local ice cream shop. I was kind of shocked that I didn't know that Chris's dad had died, or his brother, actually, because I hadn't met Chris yet. And I had spent a lot of the summertime with his brother because I had just spent that first summer in Mammoth. And so when I found out that that was Chris, there was definitely a quick connection. And he gave me like a pint of ice cream, and it was amazing. And we definitely hit it off. And that was the basis of our conversation was, hey, I'm here for you. I did lose my dad. If you ever want to talk. And I feel like he hadn't really been able to open up with many people. You know, when you're 14, 16, going through these big life changes of losing somebody, especially a parent, it's such a tricky time in that age anyways. And then to understand grief and big feelings and tears, just being able to be there for one another and talk through it. And I was a couple years ahead of him, losing my dad a few years prior to him. So I just felt like that was this underlying bond for him and I. And then we realized that we had a lot more in common because of our passion for the mountains. And he was a bit ahead of me in skiing and his progression, and I was chasing my career in snowboarding. So we had all of these common kind of denominators that kept us together and really kept that interest in the path of our life in the same direction.
And you guys are pointed in the same direction, which is up. And over the next couple of years, both of your careers start moving up. And back to the movie, when you won Rider of the Year, your mom got diagnosed with cancer during the peak of your career. And do you take on that caretaker role?
My mom was actually diagnosed 5 days before our wedding, which nobody knew, but she chose not to have treatment. And she knew she had a slow growing cancer, and that went on for about 5 years. And then in November of 2016, she was diagnosed with a mutated form of that cancer that was terminal, and it was fast growing large B-cell lymphoma. And it just rocked my whole world. She was diagnosed in November. That's the beginning of a season. I moved to Truckee to live with her because she was going through a lot of nausea and she was super dizzy, so she couldn't stand up on her own.
Okay.
So I dropped everything, moved into her house in November, and I knew that I was just going to live there until she died. And I really struggled to not have snowboarding, but I knew how valuable that time was.
Yeah. And so she chose not to have treatment. She was just like, I don't want to go through all of this, and I'm just going to go on my own terms.
Yeah, because she was diagnosed 5 years prior with this slow growing cancer, she knew that that was likely. You know, she still had blood work done and things to keep track of it. But she had been a nurse for so long, she just really knew that she did not want to go down the road of chemotherapy and being sick. She wanted to enjoy the last parts of her life without feeling sick all the time. And being a daughter, hearing that, you know, it's tricky because I want her to fight to live.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to respect her wishes. We are all individual people and humans trying to navigate the best path we can on Earth. So I knew it wasn't going to serve me to fight her choices. And I wanted to just be there for her and do what she wanted to do in those last few months that she had.
And when you're in that role and you have to like see that every day, and it's terrible, and I'm sorry to bring this up, but it's a podcast, so I'm going to ask like the stuff that sucks.
Yeah.
But you have to deal with all of that stuff. What did you do to stay sane? I mean, did you get to escape, or were there any things that you got to do? Did you get a couple days to snowboard or just kind of forget about stuff?
Yeah, I did. Thankfully, I had a small group of friends in Tahoe, but I would go up to Donner Summit and just ride, even if it was just for an hour. I felt so much better to be outside, and I would go on a walk. My mom really struggled to sleep as well, so we would get up and watch the sunrise together and the sunsets at night and just prioritize these special little moments. But for my own sanity, just trying to find a little bit of quiet time in nature where I could just be and breathe and stay present and not really let like the worry and the fear of her dying take over. And also just to replenish my own energy so I had more energy to give her.
And you know, months after she passes, and I'm sorry that she passed, but you got pregnant, and This is kind of right when we did our podcast. You were like a couple months pregnant when we sat down. And I need to apologize because when we sat down, the big part of the story was, is Burton going to support a pregnant rider? And that was an important conversation back then because people didn't support pregnant riders, it seemed like. But I knew your mom was sick and she had passed. I didn't even know what that meant as a human because I just hadn't been in that situation. And I wish I had more empathy back then. So I'm really sorry what you went through there and your loss. But you're pregnant and there's some kind of new chemistry going on in your body, I'm sure. And then on top of all of that, you really haven't had time to really grieve your mom. What does that do to you as a person? Does it make you all crazy?
Yeah, and thank you. I mean, I think as we go through these challenges in life, especially with loss, unless you've been through it, you don't know how to show up for your friends. And it's unfortunate. But then when you do go through it, you do have a lot more compassion and empathy, and that's with any challenge in life. And I feel like that's why we are able to help one another. Is every challenge that we go through, it's this learning lesson that we can pass down, or just wisdom that we can pass down to one another. And it's growth. That's human nature, is we have to learn and experience as we go. But losing my mom, getting pregnant, trying to fight for my career, I felt like I was in a storm cycle that was beautiful and building, but it was also really challenging. And there was so much grief as well as so much joy. And I think it kind of made this like hyperreactivity within me because I was like, okay, well, I'm going to put everything I can into getting back on my snowboard and being a mom. And I didn't know if I give myself enough time to actually process her dying because I was pregnant so quickly. And I felt like that was going to help me go through that process quicker.
Yeah, it was going to keep you busy and doctor's appointments, this, eating right, doing this, and you don't have to think about it all.
Exactly. And I realized pretty quickly, which you can see in Butterfly in a Blizzard, like 10 months postpartum, I just collapsed mentally, physically. My body, I had not actually processed losing my mom. And it hit me after I had our son.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start out with Liquid Force. And not only are they back supporting the podcast, but this summer, they're bringing back the most important party and event in wakeboarding. That's right, Brostock is back, and the contest features the best riders in the world. But you know what's more fun than watching the pros ride? Riding with them. And you can ride with the Liquid Force pros like Daniel Grant, Claudia Pagini, and Gunther Oka at a local lake or cable park near you at their Ride with the Pro Tour. And while Liquid Force is doing all these great things to build community on the water, they're also on the forefront of product innovation. And if you're a foil frother, you're going to want to check out the new FuseLock foil system. Wake surfers are going to love the all-new Ace and Synchro offerings. And the 2025 line features fresh boards, rad graphics, and more comp vest colorways than ever before. Park to boat to foil, Liquid Force has gear for every rider type, whether it's boat, cable, foil, or surf. To find out more about the events and the products, head on over to liquidforce.com. And when you see something you like, put it in your cart, and when you check out, enter the code POWELL15, that's all caps with no spaces, and you will save 15% off your order. Liquid Force. Feel the pull. Next up, it's Elan Skis. And Elan doesn't need to support this podcast in the summertime. I've said that every summer. But they do it because they understand the importance of cultivating the stories that make the snow industry what it is. But if you haven't noticed, while they've always been big in Europe, Elan has built a growing cult following here in the States. It all started with the still thriving ripstick revolution that made skiing easier and more fun for anyone that tried them. That same idea, easier and more fun, is what they delivered to their Playmaker series of twin tips. How does Elan deliver a better ski experience? Well, it's all about using the best materials known to man. And that's no joke. This is the same Elan that's known for building award-winning luxury yachts. So they never cut corners. And the fit and finish is better than anything else on the ski wall. Seriously, if you pick one up and you look at the edges and you see those seams of glue on all the different skis, look at Elan's and you're going to see a seamless pairing because they do take that additional time to pay that attention to detail. And it's awesome. And it makes everyone feel like they're making pro-level turns. And that's what skiing is all about, that feeling. So remember, before you buy your next pair of skis, demo a pair of Elans. Or just head on over to elanskis.com, pick a pair, and elevate your skiing experience. My final sponsor this round is Best Day Brewing. And while I love the taste of a good beer, I don't always need the alcohol. I mean, my life revolves around driving my kid places, running errands, interviewing people, managing my family, and all of these things I do better when I don't have a head full of alcohol. That's where Best Day comes in. These days, if I'm not partying, I'm still having beers, and those beers are from the award-winning Best Day Brewery. And there are a lot of NA beers out there right now, but none taste as good as Best Day. I love the hazy IPA, the Kolsch that you can get on all Alaska airline flights, and everyone seems to like the Electro Lime Cerveza. I could go on and on as they have so many flavors, and I love them all. The beauty of Best Day is that they average about 60 calories and they won't get you in trouble. And pro tip, if you're partying, try to mix in a Best Day for every alcoholic beverage you have, and it will extend your night. It does it for me, and it keeps me from doing anything stupid. To have your best day or night ever, head on over to bestdaybrewing.com. If you make that order over $50, we'll also throw in free shipping. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When we were podcasting, you wanted to have like a natural childbirth, which I think everybody wants, but then you end up having a C-section. And I would think being a pro snowboarder, having your stomach cut like that, that probably creates a long recovery and just makes everything a little more complicated.
For sure. I had just, being an athlete, I think I had always been able to put into perspective how to visualize what I want to come true in my mind, you know, whether it be tricks I wanted to learn or how I wanted to ride the mountain. I was able to visualize, and that was like my tool for getting through things. And so going into childbirth, I had this great plan that I thought I was going to be able to execute because I'm an athlete and I know my body. And when I was in active labor for 15 hours and wouldn't dilate, they kind of gave me a couple options, but there was a huge snowstorm coming. We didn't have a lot of time with the doctors because of roads closing and things. So we had to make this bigger decision that it was probably best for me and the baby to go through having an emergency C-section because he just was not dropping and I wasn't dilating. And so that just was a whole other element of like feeling like I'm losing control of an environment that I wanted to control so badly.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what that was going to do to my snowboarding, but for sure, it took me about a year to feel that connectedness again to my core.
So at this point, this is where we're podcasting and we're talking about if you're going to have to lose sponsors, and all of your deals were coming up at the exact same time. It was October when we chatted, December, everything was up, and you didn't know what was going to happen. Did you end up losing any deals from having a child?
I ended up maintaining my biggest sponsors, and that was incredible. You know, Burton stood by me. I signed with Dragon. I kept my sponsorship with Mammoth Mountain. And it was just such an awesome feeling saying, hey, this is important to me. It might be important to other women. And seeing these sponsors say, sure, we don't quite know what it's going to look like, but we want to support you. We want to stand by you. And that trust, having them trust me through that process and changing their verbiage on top of it has now, in the past 7 years, has totally shifted the landscape for a lot of different sports within action sports and outside.
Yeah, it's totally changed, and you were the first one. It seemed like that was really coming up and being talked about. So it's cool to see that everybody did the right thing, and you're in a great spot because of that. At this point in the movie, there's a part about like separation anxiety when you leave your kid. And I saw that. I know a little bit about that feeling, or I thought I knew a little bit about that feeling when I would drop my kid off at daycare and I'd leave every day and come visit him at lunch because I felt so bad leaving. But then you drop a bombshell that it didn't come up in the podcast, and you probably don't have much information out here. I usually don't use this word in the podcast, and I try to keep away from it as much as possible. But you brought up that you were molested as a child. I'm not going to ask what happened, but that impacts you with your kids now. Like, it makes it harder for you to leave your kids because of that.
That's right. Unfortunately, this person that did this to me, he's in jail. Well, it's not unfortunate. That's a great thing. He is in jail. He's been in jail since 2007 for multiple counts of molestation from all around the country. And it was a very sensitive subject to talk about, but I think it's also important because so much of what happens to us as children can shape how we parent and how we fear, or how we hold fear. And I thought that I had made amends with myself and with what had happened to me. And then when I had a child, I realized how deep my anxiety was of leaving him with anybody, and just his safety and trusting that anybody since this person had been in my family, I really struggled to even trust family to watch him. And it wasn't because they had done anything, it was just my own childhood showing me like it might not be safe. And so that was it's still extremely hard for me to let anybody that I don't know really well watch my children, because you don't know. And being a victim of molestation, it's taught me a lot of, I don't know, it's just taught me a lot. And I just hope that when people watch this movie and they learn a little bit more about my life, hopefully it can make them feel less isolated or alone through whatever they may have gone through. And as a mom, I get the question all the time, like, oh, well, you can just hire a babysitter. You can just leave them with so-and-so. And it's like, it comes back to grief and loss, unless you've been through that situation, it's really hard to know that feeling.
Yeah.
And it's just something that I'm not comfortable doing. And I am okay with that. And even if I have to pass up opportunities, that's just part of the safety I feel like as being a parent. And I really struggled with trying to balance my career because the mountains are so far away. You're out of service. You're in a high risk environment. And so that made it even more complicated, because if I truly did not trust the person that was at home with my child, I wouldn't trust myself on the mountain. And there was nothing that I could do to override that feeling.
So it totally impacts your snowboarding if you're not totally confident about what's going on at home and you can lose yourself in the snowboarding. It totally makes sense. When you think about your life, I mean, someone can see Kimmy Fasani at this point and be like, oh, she's got this great snowboard career and this and this and this. But all these details weren't out before. So they didn't see that you lost your dad, you lost your mom. There was the molestation. So like you have all that bad going on. But then the good is Chris and baby Koa, and you've got a lot of great things going on. But you also end up losing a lot of your freedom because while people think that like it's equal, men and women, and maybe it's a little bit more equal when you're bottle feeding, when you're not bottle feeding, there's a lot more that goes on the woman's shoulders. So did that kind of take a lot away from your snowboarding and your ability to function your tasks as a snowboarder because you're just a little bit more busy?
Yeah. I was trying to primarily breastfeed, and Koa didn't really take a bottle well. And I didn't have my mom to like ask, but I knew I didn't take a bottle either, but my mom was a full-time nurse. But just that, it was that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like my child's not eating. I have to stay around so that when he is hungry, I can eat or eat. And I had a really hard time separating because I just felt like he was always going to be hungry when I wasn't there. Or he was going to be crying, or there was just so much more fear. And I don't want to spoil it, but I did learn after having my second child and being forced to wean him very quickly that they will eat when they're hungry and they will take a bottle most likely. So all that stress that I was holding with Koa, I probably didn't have to hold, but it was the first child. And I was still trying to learn and be the best mom I could while learning without my own mom.
Yeah. And so you're doing what you think is best. You finally get some time to go on a trip. And then it's like for every good thing that happens, it seems like some bad stuff happens as well, at least back in the day. And you go on this trip, you've got Koa with you, you've got a nanny with you as well. And you go out to the mountain, you come back and your kid is sick and he has like kidney failure. And you've been through so many different things in life. Is there anything more scary than when something like that happens to your kid?
Oh, yeah, that one was a really hard hit because it was the first time he had been sick. I was trying not to overreact as a new mom, and he had bright green throw up and diarrhea. And I took him into a clinic, and my pediatrician from Southern California actually said, like, just keep an eye on him. She was really great as a resource, but the clinic told me if he doesn't pee, take him to the emergency room. And he didn't pee. And so that when I'm taking him to the emergency room, like waiting for answers, they do so many different things. Like they're trying to put a catheter in, they're having me force fluids. All at the end of the day, all the fluids I was forcing him had potassium, like coconut water and things like that. I tried to feed him a banana that has potassium. His body was already in kidney failure. And when they finally did the blood work at midnight, we realized that he was in kidney failure and his potassium was so high that it could have caused like a brain injury.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, it was just panic. I had to get him out of there. They didn't have a way to do dialysis. So now all of these toxic levels were in his body and stuck until I could get him to Vancouver. And that just felt like the most helpless I could have been. I wasn't there with Chris. I was there by myself with my nanny, and we had to get medevaced to Vancouver. And the whole time you're just like hoping that your child is going to be okay and that they're going to survive. And it was just so gnarly because it was such a dangerous situation. It just felt like an out-of-body experience because I'm like, how is this happening?
So all the different things that you've experienced, we're going to talk about you getting sick in a little bit, but you've experienced yourself, you've experienced your mom and your dad and your kid getting sick. I mean, like, when you think about it, is it totally different with your kid? Is it like a different thing?
Yeah, because with my kid, it makes me feel like I did something. He is helpless in some capacity. I'm the one that's feeding him. I'm the one that's taking care of him. He's under my supervision. And somehow he contracted a bacteria like E. coli or salmonella. So you're just like racing in your brain, like, what did he eat? Because that was something that maybe I could have done better. But at that point, like, all I had to do is just sit there and hope that the doctors were going to be able to help him.
Yeah. Well, at least that's not permanent and everything gets back to normal there. So that's a good thing. And then the next thing happens is the pandemic. And I would think snowboarding shuts down a little bit and skiing as well, at least in the beginning where you can't really travel for the first year. Did you guys get money from the government because you weren't able to collect income being a skier, or the sponsors stand by you, or how did that work for pro athletes?
Yeah, thankfully our sponsors stood by us, and we were really lucky because Chris had been working on his big project, Fire on the Mountain, and we had been through a lot. After Koa got sick, we spent a lot of time in the hospital, and then the pandemic happened. We just spent so much more time together as a family, and it was actually very healing. We were able to take a lot more time for ourselves and just kind of ground into being home, which we hadn't done in a very long time, and just process everything that had happened, the grief, the loss, the transformation with Koa, and then almost losing him. Like, we were able to just kind of ground ourselves and find a lot more joy being home. And I was extremely lucky. We were both extremely lucky that there wasn't the pressure of the financial side on us during that time because our sponsors did stay by us.
So you guys are in a good place there. And while things seem to be good, you're getting a lot of family time. Then again, another worse thing happens and you find a lump in your breast over the weekend. When you find it, do you go into worst case scenario, like, holy shit, this is like as bad as it can be? Or are you like, oh, maybe I found it earlier? What was the thought process?
Yeah, well, so through the pandemic, I was pregnant, and then we have Zeppelin. And about 3 months into having Zep, I noticed that I had a lump in my breast, but it felt bristly. It kind of felt coarse, if you will. And I thought that it was due to a wrist injury because it was kind of like near my armpit, but connected to my chest wall.
Okay.
And it just slowly got gristlier, but I never even thought about it being cancer. I thought that I had lived a life that was healthy and active. I watched both my parents die to cancer. So I thought that I was mitigating a life that was different from the choices that they had made. And when I was doing a self-check one day with Chris, we were both looking in the mirror, and I put my fingers on my armpit, and I felt this like really hard rock in my armpit. And I had him feel it. And I think I was almost like I was so naive in my own head. I had him feel it. And I think he was like, oh my gosh, you need to call the doctor. And I was like, no, it's Saturday. I don't need to worry about it. And he was like, no, we need to call the doctor now. And so we called the doctor, and she was actually like, I don't like the sound of this. I want you to come in at 9 a.m. on Monday. There's a breast surgeon that was here she comes in just like 2 days a month from San Diego. And so she saw me at 9 a.m. the next morning after I had mammogram and ultrasounds. And without even reviewing those, she could tell that I had breast cancer by looking at my breast, because my skin actually had been infected by the breast cancer as well. And so she just gave me this rundown of, you have inflammatory breast cancer. it starts at stage 3. We need to get you into chemotherapy as quickly as possible. Mind you, Chris and our 9-month-old baby are in the out in the lobby waiting for me because I'm still breastfeeding. And I'm just like, I thought I was ruling everything out by this appointment, not being diagnosed.
Yeah.
And so that diagnosis definitely took me out of my skin for a bit because I was like, I've already watched this happen to both my parents, and it's scary when now I have kids and a husband and I have to fight for my life, but I also have to show up with strength and like a smile every day, greeting my kids when this diagnosis could take my life. So that one was hard.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Which I know you understand.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I can't imagine. I can imagine. But I mean, just with all that you've going on and everything that you've had going on before, and then like with your chemo, do you go in for like the 6 hours and then take the chemo pack home for you and just hear all the beeps and sounds and it's just like super annoying all the time?
Yeah, so I was sitting in chemotherapy. I had to quit breastfeeding as quickly as I could. So within 3 weeks, I had weaned Zep from breastfeeding. He had never taken a bottle. I didn't even try with him. And so that's why my earlier comment, like I realized pretty quickly that if a baby's hungry, they'll drink from a bottle because I had no choice at that point. And so I learned that pretty harshly, but I was sitting in chemo within 3 weeks, had my PET scan. They found out that it was just in my breast on my right side and my lymph nodes on my right side of my skin. And so I had 6 treatments. Each treatment was between 6 and 8 hours for chemo. And then I had a double mastectomy where I was kind of given the choice not to do reconstruction because I had so much skin infected by the cancer. They had to take a lot more skin away off my chest that wouldn't have really stretched well for reconstruction.
Okay.
So I just chose to simplify that whole mental process and remain flat after my double mastectomy. And then I had to do 30 rounds of radiation.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start things out with outdoor research. I've been using OR products since I moved to Seattle almost 25 years ago because they outperform everything on the market. I mean, they build their products to perform in the wet and soggy cold weather of the Pacific Northwest. And when you live where we do, you need to have the best in class. While OR has always been known for building industry-leading gear for mountaineers, skiers, and snowboarders, they've gone all in on an award-winning bike line that FreeHub describes as outdoor research has once again raised the bar, offering riding gear that's not just functional but also stylish and durable. That meticulous design and thoughtful engineering of the Freewheel collection have the power to transform the mountain biking experience. So high praise, and Outdoor Research is doing a lot of things on the athlete side. While they launched with an incredible team, they had the Van Steenbergen brothers, Georgia Astley. This year, they've added Casey Brown, Carson Storch, and others. And between the athletes and the events they support, while OR might be new to the bike world, they've always lived it, and there's not many brands doing what OR is doing in the world of bike. To see the new products and what the hype is all about, head on over to OutdoorResearch.com. My final sponsor is Stanley, the iconic Northwest brand that invented the category of keeping things hot and cold over 100 years ago. You remember Stanley from your grandfather's green thermos that kept his coffee hot forever when he took you out on adventures. Well, Stanley still makes that bottle and so much more. Think tumblers, water bottles, barware, camping utensils, coolers, vacuum bottles. There really is something for everyone at Stanley. And between the unique colors and the collaborations that Stanley's doing, there really is something for everyone in the Stanley line. And they're not going to gouge you with crazy prices. Stanley is the originator, and they pride themselves on providing you and me with the best products at the best value. And that value gets even better when you shop with my code. To use it, head on over to Stanley1913.com, go shopping, and buy a ton of stuff because, like I said, this code is 30% off. It's the best deal that Stanley offers. And when you check out, enter the code capital P-O-W-E-L-L. That's Powell 2025. So no spaces in between that. Capital P-O-W-E-L-L 2025. That's where you get your code. Thank you very much for the support, Stanley. They make the best gear in the world. You've seen them everywhere. And if you don't have one, you definitely need one. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. What's the worst of all that for you?
The chemo was the hardest.
And you did it solo, right?
Yeah. So Chris and I had to divide and conquer. I was having really bad sensitivity on my skin after my chemo, so I couldn't have anybody touch me. And that was really hard with the kids.
Yeah.
So we chose to have the kids and Chris stay in Mammoth. And I would go back and forth to San Diego to get treatment, and I would have a friend join me just in case I had some type of reaction to one of the drugs while I was sleeping or something. That way I had somebody in the house. But yeah, we would have an amazing group of friends come and support Chris while I was gone for the week. And then I would have somebody come and stay with me down in Southern California. So we definitely had to be separated during that section of time. And just the way the drugs made me feel, and then coming home to the kids and not wanting to do anything except lay on the couch, but having to show up like a mom was really hard.
Honestly, watching this whole movie was really, really hard. And half of me was thinking to myself, like, why would you even make this movie? Because it's hard to watch for, obvious reasons. But you had to live through all of this. And then you get to the point where you can finally ring the cancer bell. Where my wife, she rang it once and then it came back, so whatever. Or she didn't actually. I brought a bell and we rang it in the car because they didn't have it in our place. But when you ring the cancer bell, what does that mean to you? I mean, it's got to be like the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, ringing the bell was huge. And maybe your wife was able to explain this a little bit, but there's like this fear of it coming back, which you experienced with her, and it never goes away. So even though you're ringing that bell, you're sitting on this side of the pendulum going, oh my gosh, like what just happened? What did I just go through? And am I going to have to go through that again? And admittedly, I've watched a lot of my friends that were diagnosed at the same time as me either never get a complete pathological response after surgery, or their staging has been upcreased to stage 4 or metastatic. It's like it's just scary because cancer is something that once you have had, even when it goes away, there's still always this little voice in the back of your head that you're not out of the clear.
Yeah. And you're always going to have that. Anne said that, like, even if I do get an all clear thing and we can move forward, she's like, it's not like I'm not going to think about it a little bit every day. And that's just, that's part of her life. But thinking about coming out of cancer, because you get to ring the bell, which means you're coming out of it, you're going to get your body back, but you're snowboarding on a pro level. How long does it take you to get back to a high level of snowboarding?
We had an amazing experience. So after my last treatment, which was at the beginning of April of 2022, Chris had organized this surprise trip for me and the boys to join some of the Burton team and Donna Carpenter, the owner of Burton, up at Baldface in Nelson, BC, for kind of a celebratory trip. The Burton team was doing it because they were just coming out of the Olympics, and Burton likes to do this for their athletes, reminding them like the joy of snowboarding outside of contests. And for me, Jeff Pensiero and Donna and my team managers at Burton organized that me and the boys and Chris would all go up there. And even if I couldn't ride, I was back in the mountains and kind of being able to be around my community again. And I showed up at Baldface, and Chris had done all the packing. He surprised me. So I had no idea we were going snowboarding. And I show up at Baldface usually when I would be my sickest, and it's my last treatment. So it's like where you're your weakest. And I remember stepping on my snowboard and being like, cool, if I could make 2 runs, that would be incredible. I rode bell to bell every day we were out there without ever needing to go to the bathroom. I mean, peeing, but I couldn't make it from my couch to my bathroom without having to poop. And that was a crazy experience at home. And so I was like, how am I going to be out in the backcountry and not be able to use the bathroom? But for some reason, as soon as I stepped on my snowboard, I'm telling you, it was like an out-of-body experience that my body was plugged into an energy source that it needed, and it knew it. So it just thrived. And I was not sore. I was not tired. I was able to ride. And I felt like it was the most life-giving experience that I could have ever had, because I should not have been able to do that. Or that is the story I was telling myself. And what that taught me was that is how much I needed it. that is how much we need these things that are great for our mind and body. And time in nature can be so reviving. And that told me that cancer was only going to be part of the book. It didn't have to be the whole book, and it didn't have to be the end of my snowboarding career. And it was allowing me this space to try to redefine my own desires within snowboarding. The fact that I was able to show up on that trip and ride, I realized that maybe I could still be back on my snowboard as a professional athlete after this diagnosis. And sure enough, that's what happened.
I mean, I would think there's some ego involved too. I mean, it doesn't seem like you have a big ego at all, but I mean, you're a professional snowboarder. It's not like you're Kimmy who's married to a pro skier. You're Kimmy, a pro snowboarder who is rider of the year. And there's something to like some kind of feeling when you realize that you still have it and it's just been taken away for a little bit, but it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, I ended up working with a sports psychologist, and she really helped me put on paper what my desires were after this diagnosis. And I really wanted to compete in natural selection. And having Chris as my husband, you know, he understands what it's like to be an athlete. He knows what it's like to be in those mountains. I would admit that there was a bit of fear of me here. I just went through cancer. It's like a very life-threatening diagnosis. And then now I'm choosing to show up in Alaska and Revelstoke, you know, with big ambitions. And he's like, really? You have to go out there again in this state? But mentally, I just put so much energy into why I wanted to be out there, why I wanted to be back with the people that I really admired in my snowboarding career, why I wanted to be back in the mountains that felt so life-giving, and why doing this contest meant something to me. It wasn't about getting on the podium, you know, it was about stretching my capacity as a human to know that I could do hard things. Cancer was extremely hard. It was not something that I chose. Snowboarding has been such an amazing career, and I've done hard things out there. I've had big injuries, but now it felt like it was going to be easier because it was fun, and I was choosing it for the fun. I was choosing it for the life-giving reasons that it had always been there for me. And maybe it was also like me running away from my diagnosis because I didn't want to process it, and giving me something to look forward to.
You end up getting on the podium, which is pretty incredible, but maybe not the goal, even though it happens. You just wanted to kind of see what you could do, being back with the best snowboarders in the world where you belong. But I would think when you leave that, getting the bronze or getting third place, whatever you got there, what does that do to your self-confidence, your self-worth, your self-everything? Because like it's got to feel good to know that you're still among the best.
Yeah, I would say going to Revelstoke was actually a very humbling, embarrassing experience because it was very terrifying. You know, it was the first time I was coming back out onto my snowboard after my diagnosis, and there was a lot of pressure around this wording that it was like a comeback. And I had to quickly rephrase that as like, can we just say that it's like a welcome back? I don't have high expectations for myself. I just want to be here because cancer felt really hard and I want this to feel more fun. Maybe I shouldn't have stepped into the biggest contest in the backcountry right after to not like level out those expectations. But showing up in Alaska, that was where my heart felt great. I loved being up there. We still had difficulties with the snow conditions, but being with the crew and the people surrounding us, you know, the weather, those mountains, they're magical. And being able to walk away just knowing that I had done something that was really fun and hard and challenging. And it just gave me kind of a reboot in my body. And unfortunately, after I finished that contest, I had had some swelling issues with my knee. And I ended up going in and getting an MRI and realized that I need a knee replacement.
Oh.
I think because of going through chemo, I had had a pretty significant knee injury with a multi-ligament repair back in 2012. And we think that maybe those ligaments failed, or somehow like right at the peak of my career 7 or 8 years ago, something happened to my ligaments because bone has regrown into those holes where those ligaments would reattach. So that takes a lot of years. But I think because I was so strong throughout my career, I just didn't notice. And chemo, I lost a lot of weight and a lot of muscle mass. And so that like exposed a lot of injuries on the other side of my diagnosis. So after natural selection, when I found that out, I've just really had to pull back from the sport. And yet my sponsors are still incredibly supportive, stepping more into like a mentorship advocacy role and just waiting for the time to be right for my knee to get repaired and kind of just walking through it the best I can. But it was such a gift to not know that information as I stepped into that contest.
Yeah, you wouldn't want that in the back of your head.
Yeah, because like now I know, but I've already done it, and I'm just so proud of myself for saying yes and doing something that felt really hard.
And with the movie, we don't really hear about the knee part, I don't think. But
No.
the movie ends, it's butterfly and a blizzard. Everybody should see it. The one thing is, I think the movie probably changed, like the storyboard of the movie probably changed like 3 or 4 different times because it's been like a 7-year process, I feel like, for you making this movie. When can the world see it?
Yeah, so Butterfly in a Blizzard is out. It did take 7 years to make. It can be seen on iTunes, a bunch of different streaming platforms for rent and purchase. So just type in Butterfly in a Blizzard and you'll find the place that you can watch it. And I just hope that as people watch it, even if they're not parents, it is really this deep dive about motherhood, but it's also about resilience and courage. And I hope that it makes other people feel a little bit less isolated or alone in the challenges that they're navigating.
Awesome. Well, I will say when the movie ends, there's credits and it looks like there's 24 to 30 people that need to be paid. What kind of budget does a movie like this have? Because it seems like it's a big budget thing.
It was a big project. It was completely self-funded. And then we had, I call her an angel donor, come in and help us finish the project, which was such a gift. And I feel like in the end, the film, it took a lot of money, but it was telling a story that we didn't even know we were going to tell. We thought we were going to make a movie of the two of us navigating our careers, me standing up to have verbiage changes in my contracts, and it morphed over and over and over again. We had filmed our final interviews 3 weeks before I was diagnosed with cancer. So then we had to open the whole film again and say, what is this? And I would say the biggest gift of this film was having Tyler Hamlet be the cinematographer for every clip in that movie, except the archive footage was his. And just being a great friend that could film us during these heated, intimate moments, that people don't really see behind closed doors. Tyler is such an amazing friend, but he's also an amazing filmer. And he captured the essence of what we were going through all of this, the past 7 years. And then Rose Core came in to edit. And so she went through all of our footage and really found the story because she was 3 months postpartum with her second baby when she sat down to digest all this footage. And she realized that this story could be a story of motherhood. And those two together really made this movie come together with some more editing help from Cody Carter.
Well, amazing people. I don't know Rose, but I know Tyler and Cody and know that they are super talented. That's pretty much the podcast, but that's not all of the podcast because I do something at the end that I call Inappropriate Questions. And that's where I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And I was able to get Sherry McConkey to ask those 3 questions. So she recorded 3 questions for me to play to you. And are you ready for me to play question number 1?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
What is prolapse, and is that important to your pro snowboarding?
Prolapse. So because I had a C-section, I didn't actually have prolapse, but prolapse, in my understanding, is when you aren't able to hold your pee in, like your vagina kind of is falling out.
Okay.
Your uterus is falling out. And so in my case, I have a hard time like jumping on trampolines because I immediately have to go pee. But I think it's a very common situation for women that have gone through childbirth, but it's one of those things that we just don't talk about. So much changes in our body and so much can be lifelong, like altering you lifelong after having a child, and prolapse is one of them. Thank you, Sherry.
That's a good one. So you don't need to have prolapse to be a pro snowboarder. They're totally different things. Let's go to question number 2.
You are an open book. How hard was filming this movie on Chris?
All right, he's a little bit more quiet, I feel like, than maybe you. Was it a challenge for him to open up?
I think that there was a lot of confusion through the filming of this film because we didn't know what the story was. And because it was changing all the time, there was a lot that we were learning about each other. And I think for Chris, being a man and we have different needs, at least for me. There was so much emotion. There was so much grief that I was processing. There was so many big feelings. There was so much pressure that I needed to be able to talk. And Tyler would just set up the camera and I would just talk to it, but there was times where I feel like Chris, I'm so proud of him because this movie, it's very vulnerable. And he was very brave to let this movie kind of come out the way it did. And I think we've both learned a lot about each other, but I think it was extremely challenging for Chris to have this movie made and be out there because it shows the differences in kind of gender roles. And we try to be pretty honest about how we were navigating them.
Yeah, and you guys did a great job of it. And I'm going to jump into your final question.
I think you told a story about pooping last time you were on this podcast. Now, 8 years later, do you have a good exploding diaper story?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, pooping seems to be a running theme in my life. And I would say for the diapers, you're always going to face different situations with your kids. And it's always when you're not prepared. I remember being on a handful of hikes when babies were little and having yellow poop all over my shirt from the carrier and being like, well, this is just part of my uniform now. So you're just stained and sticky and going, this is part of it. And maybe that's what makes me so prepared now is I try to have at least something in my bag that will clean up some kind of mess. If it's not for me, it's for the kids.
Fair enough. All right. I like that you clarified that. So that's Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast. And really, everybody can look at you as this incredible athlete, which you are. And a lot of times us commoners are really jealous of incredible athletes like yourself because you get these incredible trips and you get to do all these great things and it's like your life looks so amazing. But when you see this movie and you can see inside what really your life looks like, it's not all roses. I mean, if you asked anybody like, hey, would you choose having your mom and dad losing them to cancer, your kid having a kidney failure, you having cancer, and you getting to be a pro snowboarder who's not like a pro athlete's going to make millions of dollars. You're going to have a successful career and whatever. But if you ask people to choose, they'd probably be like, no, I'd rather have the regular life with nothing because you've lived such a hard life, but you're still so positive and inspirational. And it's really awesome to have you on the podcast because that's what I need on the podcast is some inspirational shit. And that is you. I am stoked to have you on the podcast again. And thank you for telling your story.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it. And I just want to also tell people that, that bubbly side of us all is there, but it doesn't mean that we can't have the deep feelings and the deep loss and the deep grief. So being able to recognize the both and, like the pendulum of life, it can be hard and beautiful at the same time. And even though it looks glossy, it's okay to step back and realize that we're all just humans doing our best.
No, that was really well said. Hard and beautiful at the same time. I'm going to use that sometime. I should have used it in my speech last night, but whatever. Well, that's it. That's our podcast.
Thank you.
So that was time with Kimmy Fasani. And man, while I've had a rough go the past 3 years, Kimmy's whole life has had challenges weaved throughout it. I mean, she's a professional athlete, and she's truly seen the best of times. I mean, she's traveled the world. She's done everything you could possibly do on a snowboard. And if you're a kid with the snowboard dream, you want to be Kimmy Fasani. I mean, natural selection, rider of the year, all the different things she's done. She's had an incredible career. But then you peel back the curtain or you peel back the onion or you do whatever I'm talking about doing. And you find out that there have been so much tragedy in her life and things have been so scary and uncertain. And she's come out the other side, which is really the great thing because she's been through the grinder. And I can only imagine that there were some really, really tough times through all the things that she's went through. And honestly, I know that because I've seen the movie that you should see, Butterfly in a Blizzard, and you can get a little bit more understanding of what Kimmy had to go through to come back to be herself again. But I know how broken I've been, and I've only been a caregiver. I can only imagine the kinds of shit always going through Kimmy's mind, but she's had a hard and an incredible life. And that's the podcast. At this point, I'm not going to say much more in this outro. I need to get out of here, so I'm going to ask you to review me wherever you listen and to support my incredible sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Best Day Brewing, Stanley, and Liquid Force. Have a great week, everyone.